Welcome everybody to our May Residential Architect Showcase. I don't know, Rhiannon, what is this, number 5? Number 4?
Number 4.
Number 4.
Number 4.
Yeah, we had a little blip in scheduling a couple months ago. Anyway, it's counting, right? We're very glad that we have Hutker Architects here today. And before they start, I just want to do a little housekeeping. One is I'm going to post again the Residential Design Committee LinkedIn page or group. And we'd really encourage you to join the group. It's really our fastest way to get information to the RDC without having to kind of go through the BSA's paperwork, which could take a day or two. So if there's something that's really pressing, we'll post it to the LinkedIn page. So I'll put that in the chat after Ryan and Jim start their presentation. The other thing is I will post a link for learning credits, so you can get either a certificate or have the BSA record this for a learning unit. The other thing is our next, sorry, I'm doing about 5 things at once. Our next event is actually June 11th. It's going to be in person, and it's going to be at Divine Design Showroom on Battery Wharf in the North End. And it's a presentation by Ellen Perko, formerly of CBT. She's now at Embrace. I mean, literally a week there. Cedar Construction and Divine Design. So if you go to the BSA's website, look for June 11th. It will be one of our first in-person events in a long time. And we're limited to about 40 people. So please sign up. If you're a BSA member, it's free, light drinks, light nibbles, things like that. There'll be a presentation. We're trying to get an HSU credit for it, which are gold, right? As we know. And what else about the event? Yeah, it's from 5 to 7. It'll be a nice networking event. You can stroll through Divine Design's showroom and see their product. So it should be a great in-person event.
Yeah, they have a nice space.
They do. They do. So June 11th. So they'll be talking about a sustainable approach to actually product reuse at their Farnsworth project when they combine 2 units together. Actually, I think I saw somebody here from Say, right? You're at CBT. Anyway. All right, well, let's start. We have Ryan Alcadino and Jim Cappuccino from Hutker Architects. And they are going to be presenting, the title is Creating Plans with Purpose, Lessons Learned in Hutker Architects' Narrative Design Approach. Creating plans with purpose. Every homeowner and every project brings a special set of circumstances to the design process. It is through truly understanding daily life patterns and movements, a home's connection to its setting, and a sense of well-being and fulfillment that we're able to successfully translate organic ideas into beautifully illustrated stories. In this webinar, Jim Cappuccino, partner AIA, and Ryan Alcadino, principal of Hutker Architects, will present lessons learned as they navigated the challenges and rewards of creating design narratives and addressing client requirements, all while artistically bringing to life a home and sanctuary that their clients fall in love with. That's the hard part, right? As examples, they will each share a recent project, one in Connecticut and one on Cape Cod, that illustrates the evolution of dwelling. I just want to, before they start, one of the learning objectives is the ONTIC initiative. And I learned about this just as you guys were pulling this presentation together. At the end, I'd really like to understand what Hutker is doing by creating this foundation. Or this initiative. I found it really, really compelling as it relates to residential design. All right, without further ado, I'm going to turn this over. I ask people to just mute themselves. And if you have a question, put it in the chat. If it's really a clarifying question of something they just said, blurt it out and interrupt. But let's try to keep our questions to the end. All
All
right.
right. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Daniel. I'm Jim Cappuccino, and Ryan and I are excited and look forward to sharing our process with you today and two recently completed projects, as Daniel said, one in Connecticut and one on Cape Cod. Little background about myself, and then I'll turn that over to Ryan. I am born and raised in Massachusetts, grew up in North Attleboro. I went to college for my Bachelor of Architecture at Roger Williams University. Graduated in the early 90s when the economy was not doing so well here in the Boston area. So I was forced to look elsewhere for work. And my wife and I found ourselves traveling out west and ultimately landing a job with a residential firm in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where I spent 13 years. Son was born there, family brought us back, and now I've been with Hutker Architects for the last 19 years, working out of the Falmouth and Boston office. Ryan?
Yep. So, hi everyone. My name is Ryan Godino. I'm a principal here at Hutker Architects. Similar to Jim, born and raised in Massachusetts. I actually went to school here in Boston at Wentworth Institute of Technology. Similar to Jim's story, I graduated in 2009, 2010. The economy wasn't doing great. Lost my job here in the city. Always wanted to work for Hutker Architects. It was the perfect opportunity to move to the Cape and kind of work for them and really kind of dive into their narrative design. I actually moved back to the city a little over 2 years ago to help head up the new Boston office. So here I am back in the city, and I've been with the firm for 14 years. So it's been an exciting journey.
Thanks, Ryan. So Hutker Architects is a custom residential architecture and interior design firm. It was founded by Mark Hutker, who's on the call today, I think in 85 or 86 on Martha's Vineyard. And over the last 38 years, we've expanded locations into Falmouth, Plymouth, and most recently Boston, which is the office that Ryan leads. And we're coming up on celebrating our second year anniversary this August in that office. Over the years, we've grown the firm to expand to 5 partners, 5 principals, and a team of 65 professionals. Photographs from each of the offices represented here. And we all just passionate about residential work in the meaningful architecture that we're able to create and advancing the art of dwelling, which we're going to talk a lot about today. And we can't do the great work that we get to do without this amazing team. In this talk, we're going to focus on design methodology, where specific narratives, those related to like client and community insight, emerge as starting points and guidelines for our design process. And we've come to understand that what is most important and what needs to be examined first is the narrative for each project. So we encourage our clients to tell their stories, who they are, who they want to be in their homes. And this approach has been at the core of our work for all these years. And we'll ask clients to write a series of diary entries or journals describing their perfect day in their future home. And here are a few examples. One's a graphic entry and the other a written entry. And they answer differently the questions that we ask, like what would a rainy day be like versus a sunny day? And how do you visualize the experience of your home changing throughout the seasons? And what happens socially and spatially when guests arrive and children bring home their friends? And what would bring joy and meaning to time in their new home. And it's these imaginative accounts that help us identify the individual and those collective life patterns our architecture must support. But a home's narrative is also influenced by connections to place and community and history. And that's one reason our homes are rarely entirely traditional or entirely modern. This home, for example, was constructed using stone excavated from the building site. And it's the same type of stone that was used to build several of the historic structures in the town center. This was a project that Ryan had worked on. And I think it's a wonderful example of a home connecting to its sense of place. We also believe a family home is the central site for making memories and bonding over shared experiences. But as we learned pre-COVID, it's also essential to remember that everyone at some point yearns for a place where they can enjoy time alone. And that's why a lot of our houses provide variety of areas that support gathering, as well as plenty of spaces to take peaceful time away. But at the same time, together and apart, that design methodology builds on multi-generational flexibility. And this home was designed with that concept in mind. We have children's wing to the left, primary suite to the right, and in the center is this living room, dining room, kitchen, central space. So children, parents can have their autonomy, but they can all gather together for meals and shared stories. Also important, the routes for moving around inside and outside Hutker homes. We organize paths leading to visual destinations, and every progression, either in the landscape or between rooms, has a goal in the distance. And that might be a piece of art, it might be a framed view. In this photo, at exactly one point along the street, a momentary view opens straight through the front hedge, into the house, and through the marsh beyond. And it's those transitions that make the progression memorable. And finally, the planning and construction of a home, of course, is only the beginning of its story. And stewardship is a primary value for Hutker architects. And we work hard to ensure a long and worthwhile future of our houses. The roof lines on this house, along with the differing window head heights and foundation materials, conveys an impression that was assembled piece by piece over many decades. And it's these connections, where you live, how you live, that informs the experience in each of the homes we design. It's not just a house. It's where you relax and laugh and play and dream and celebrate and gather, and it's where you live. And this is a collection of words that we've captured over many decades through our clients' journal entries, words they've shared that bring joy and meaning to their lives. So now Ryan and I will share the two homes that reflect our clients' life patterns and the values and the guiding principles of this narrative design. Ryan? Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. So here we are. This project's actually located in Connecticut. So as Jim mentioned, we take all this narrative, not only from the clients, but also the site. And this site specifically really kind of led itself to the narrative of this home and kind of the overall aesthetic. So next page. So here we are, just for general reference of where we are located in Mass to compare to where the site is located with that orange dot, again, on the coast. So here we are a little more zoomed in, again, located on the coast in Connecticut, amazing views to the beach beyond, a very popular yacht club, and sound beyond. So it's a heavily trafficked area. Working on the coast, we're pretty familiar with, but this was not your typical coastal property, which we all might be really familiar with. There was no winding road leading up to the house, acres of land, no neighbors to be seen. This is actually the complete opposite. It was a tight property, a really dense neighborhood, and it actually had right on the street. So next slide. So here we are. These are actually the first photographs we took of the site. The homeowners purchased this property actually without the house on it. which allowed us to really think about it as a clean slate and not be really tempted by what might have been there and how we might locate the buildings and the volumes. So it really gave us a clean slate. As you can see, the site was actually really narrow from front to back, but it actually had some width to it, which allowed us, you'll see in plan, to really express its horizontal nature, competing with its vertical. It's right on the water's edge. If you look left and right, you can see the neighbors are right up close, each trying to get to the edge of the water so they can get as much water view as possible. Also, you can see every house along the neighborhood up at the top image or the bottom image. They each tell their own story in their type of architecture, which allowed us to create our own narrative of what should be on this property.
Mhm.
So this slide kind of shows a bunch of different diagrams we had to really deal with the site constraints. So as we dug deeper into the zoning laws and really of the town and in the neighborhood, we realized we had a lot of constraints to work with, which I'm sure we're all really familiar with. But we kind of took those constraints and really used them in a positive way, and they actually became important players for the overall design of the house. One big thing we had was we had a limb wall line that actually cut right through the property, so it actually located the house pretty much for us right to begin with. The upper left-hand corner, I'm sure we're all familiar with, square foot calculations and in area calculations. This house, actually, we had a 30% rule. So it actually included any overhangs of 3 feet or greater. So we had to be really cautious about all the projections and overhangs at the building. We'll see in the next image and a couple of the images after that, how we managed to actually overhang the second floor by a couple of feet, not only to add extra square footage that we needed for the program, but also to really help with the narrative of the house, the narrative design of the house, and also help break up the scale of this project.
Mhm.
This was a full-time residence for these clients. Oh, sorry, other slide, Jim. This was a full-time residence for the family. So it was a family of 7. They had a lot of program, pretty tight site. So we had to fit a lot into this neighborhood. Off to the right, you'll see there was an attic rule. We actually were really surprised. I'd never dealt with this before, but the town was very strict on the attic use. We couldn't actually use more than 25% of the attic. Even if we were well below the height, everything, we were passing all the codes and everything that the town was requesting, we just weren't allowed to use more than 25%. So you'll see in some of the diagrams that we had to just change the ceiling rafters, jut them up for really no rhyme or reason, but really just to break down that 25%. Anything over 5'6" was actually going to be accounted towards that 25%, and we actually needed to fit 2 bedrooms up there. So we really had to give this kind of push and pull in certain spaces on the second floor and on the third floor to fit within that rule. One of the biggest key players here, we actually had to work within the VE zone, which I know we're all familiar with, but this was actually a really big player in the overall site strategy for this property. We had the base flood elevation to work with, but also the design flood elevation. Because of such restrictive height rules in this town, it actually forced us to really think about how structure was actually going to be worked. So everything from the subfloor and below was actually all waterproof. The ducts underneath, there was just a crawl space. Everything had to be waterproofed because we had really no basement to put any of this in. So we really had to think about how we were going to make this work with such tight floor plan packs. We had the typical flood vents, so that was also taken into account. And even things like that, where these outdoor covered spaces, which had maybe steps to grade or terraces, we had to design at that bottom right-hand corner, even cantilever steps and terraces to allow the flood vents beyond to kind of do what they need to do. And if something happened over time, water to flood through these open areas. And then the last one, which was really a pretty big challenge, was the height restriction, which that kind of just bottom left image. We were already up a bunch of feet, so we really didn't have much to play with on height. The one way we actually were able to work through this was the town actually measured the height restriction to the midpoint of the roof, which is typical. We're used to maybe kind of the ridge. This was the midpoint. So one way we kind of helped with this height restriction is we actually elongated the eaves. So we got a little bit of more max height because again, we had to fit some bedrooms up there. So we really elongated the eaves, but that also actually played into, you'll see the design on how we were able to, with those elongated eaves, create box gutters and different details at the eave conditions. So all this really kind of restraints and constraints really kind of started to lead itself into what this design might be. Even you'll see some dormers that lead out. We needed to get access from those bedrooms. Those had its own rules, couldn't be greater than 1/3, 2/3. So we were dealing with a lot of different elements right out of the gate to kind of get a lot of program on this property. So next slide. Thank you. So here we are with where we ended up with the project. After learning about all these rules and constraints we had to work with, we started to dive into what should be on this property. What's the story for this house and how does it fit into its neighborhood? So the first thing we did was, again, the neighbors are left and right. A lot of different houses are speaking different languages of architecture. We actually broke the house into 3 gables, hence the name, 2 perpendicular to the street presence, which is, I'm not sure how to annotate, but it's on the left and right, and there's a center kind of volume in the middle, and then one more gable that is parallel to the street that houses kind of the garage off to the left. We were able to connect these gables with these more modern flat connectors and kind of glassy connections that kind of allowed the house to breathe from front to back and back to front. With that kind of whole concept of, you know, the VE and really having to raise the house, this kind of allowed us to create this really centered space right in the middle that allowed us to create some privacy, you know, keeping this kind of really glassy thing. So it felt like we were breaking down these volumes, but how do we create this really glassy moment on a neighborhood that, you know, there are people driving by, walking by daily. So being able to raise that house up and creating this beautiful kind of sculpture garden at the front really created privacy from not only the homeowners within, but also the kind of people passing by. The way we also kind of programmatically laid out the spaces were this first floor, which you'll see delineated by more modern windows and doors and materiality, is kind of the more public spaces. And once you go up to the second and third floors, all of the family private spaces were actually gathered within the 3 white gabled volumes. Next slide. So here we are at the exterior front entry elevation. You can see those 3 white boxes that I mentioned, the 3 volumes. And we treated this really differently by creating these white upper, more quote unquote traditional gabled volumes at the top, sitting on this much darker, more modern base. So when you kind of squint, it almost can't really tell what's touching grade and what's not. You can also see there's a little bit of that overhang. You'll see it a little bit further, but those white boxes sitting a little bit proud and kind of overhanging of the bottom kind of creates a little bit of shadow. And also that was a way to introduce this modern steel channel that you'll see kind of repeated on the inside. We also kind of even pushed that a little bit further on the white upper volumes. We used wood double hungs, more residential scale. We kind of shrunk the proportions of the windows. Well, at the base and the connector volumes, we use these larger spans of glass, steel elements, and this darker base. So really that contrast of high and dark. And you can see right in the middle, that sculpture garden kind of starting to peek its way through. Next slide. So here we are on the left, which is that entry sculpture garden, which again, really created this really beautiful backdrop to the living room, into the great room you can see beyond, but also really a beautiful privacy from the street. On the right is the entry sequence, really thoughtfully designed by the landscape architect, Stimson Studios, I think, which we all know. Really, we had to get ourselves up high, again, to create some privacy and also for the VE zone. But as you can see, as you're approaching to the house, you see the iconic gable sitting on top of this darker base. There's this beautiful steel channel, and then this really beautiful glowing element to the left, which is actually the stair. It's the only part in this composition and all the volumes where the white and the dark actually combine with some sort of shift or change. And that was really intentional because we really wanted to express the verticality of that stair and that experience from not only the exterior, but also the interior when you turn the corner.
Mhm.
Next slide.
Let's see. Right there,
There we
Ryan.
go.
Yeah.
Yes. So here we are at the first kind of glance of what the interior story and narrative might be of this house. It's a beautiful, large, custom 4-foot pivot door with some amazing sculptural stair right to the right. It's actually suspended by that same perimeter steel channel that we have around the exterior that's supporting the white and the dark. We have it supporting this beautiful stair. The client loved wood, steel, stone, and glass. I think we all love those good good elements, but you know, that quickly could feel pretty industrial and feel really hard. So the architecture team with the interior design team, which was Tom Felicia out of New York, him and his team, you know, we all worked together really to create and use these elements in really clever ways and maybe changing its finish or touch, really to soften up some of these spaces as you walk throughout the house. Next view. Here's just another shot of that amazing stair. It was a really fun challenge. It is actually suspended. It's not touching the ground, but you can actually see that perimeter steel channel right at the top, kind of, again, cascading around the house, and certain elements are going to be pinning from that. But you can start seeing a little bit of the great room, or the life room we like to call it, beyond, and a little bit of peekaboo of a brass metal finish, which you'll start seeing layered throughout the house to really start bringing some more kind of softness to that hard, what we might think of a steel finish. So there's a little bit of a steel and a brass really kind of coming together.
Mhm.
Here we are in the life room, right? So right in the center of the house, there's a gable bookending this space. There's really beautiful Keller mineral steel doors that open up to the water beyond. And also, what you can't see right to our back is another set of matching sliders that actually open up to that courtyard. The clients love to entertain, so this idea of opening this property, and again, it's not super large. They wanted to be able to use all elements of the site. So front yard, backyard, we really wanted to bleed it all, so it all just felt like one big space. You can see that steel perimeter channel again going throughout the full space. That could create some kind of really, you know, maybe too industrial or too hard surfaces. So we really start to treat that with these really beautiful oak beams and ceilings. The interior designer, Tom, and his team really brought these beautiful low slung, really soft furnishings to really kind of create some softness in this space. You can see some cruciform columns supporting the structure perimeter beam. You also see those on the exterior. It's, again, when this house is open, this bleeding of indoor, outdoor really all becomes one big space. And then this beautiful fireplace that really pins this space all together. It really combines the left kind of TV area and the billiards to the right. The clients love playing pool. They wanted to be a part of their everyday, so they weren't afraid of it and we weren't afraid of it. So we really wanted to kind of give it a really great centered space. And really, just like the exterior, how we kind of bookended this great room with the two gables, we wanted to do that with the interior space as well. So we designed this really beautiful bar beyond, which is right at the far end of the page. And if you go to the next slide, Jim. Here's just a zoomed in version of that beautiful bar. Again, it's bringing those elements of wood, stone, glass, and metal all together. And then on the other side, a TV console that kind of has those same elements together. But on the right-hand side, again, you know, it is a bar and a billiards table right in that big, great space. They want it to be not feeling like a bar. So it was really designed and curated like it almost as a library or a vintage kind of bar, with glassware is somewhat exposed, but Tom and his team found some really beautiful vintage shakers and decanters and glassware to really kind of curate the space to make it feel a little more polished. On that right-hand corner, like I said, it's that TV unit, which bookends the other side of this room that really creates a little bit of a divider space right before you see the peekaboo that you turn the corner into the dining room. Here we are in the dining room. So just to the right was that TV and life room. This space was formal yet informal. The family and actually eats all their meals here. They have game nights, they hang out, the kids do their homework. So we really needed this space to kind of feel like two different vibes depending on what they were really trying to do with this space. So one way we did that was to add some not only physical warmth, but some visual warmth, this beautiful plastered Venetian plaster fireplace. We let that wood ceiling kind of bleed in the opposite direction, and these really beautiful sliders that lead out to an outdoor terrace and the views beyond. And right off to the left, the French doors right on either side of the fireplace actually open up to another dining and living experience in a covered porch.
Mhm.
Here we are in the kitchen. So the family really loves to cook, entertain, but when we first started programmatically laying out the house, we had the kitchen on the water side, and that wasn't needed. You know, the homeowners really wanted the kitchen at the front of the house because it was really what they considered like the cockpit of the home. The family wanted to see not only kind of the visitors coming and going, but it was really important to them to see the kids coming and going from the bus stop, which was right off to the corner. You could see this really beautiful sculpture garden again from the kitchen. We knew it was going to be at the front of the house. We wanted to really kind of create these really beautiful elements throughout the day when you're having breakfast there or making lunches for everybody, that you were just also enjoying the view in a different aspect, not just the water. We used the darker wood cladding that we use on the exterior. We brought that darker finish into the interior. We worked with small bone on this kitchen, and that kind of was really intentional to really start bringing in this depth of exterior materials and interior materials. So they really felt like they were cohesive, and that exterior materiality was also starting to be brought into this kind of weathered interior. This kitchen actually bleeds right into the dining room. As you can see, that wood ceiling kind of just ripples its way through. So it's really this one big cohesive space. So that formality, informality really starts all bleeding, but that really beautiful oak ceiling really becomes the gathering of all those spaces. Here we are in the primary bedroom. So now we're upstairs, and kind of you could see how we might have changed the materiality and kind of the nature of the ceilings, really to kind of create a more cozy, more intimate, private moments. We brought the same kind of fireplace concept from the living room upstairs, this really Venetian, beautiful plastered fireplace. Really a lot of fabric Tom and his team brought in, again, to bring that scale and that intimacy down. And this really beautiful slide that, again, opens up to the views beyond with this beautiful private balcony. Here we are in the primary bath, just off the primary bedroom. Created this really beautiful, large, expansive his and hers shower with amazing views to the oceans beyond. We really wanted the homeowner really enjoyed the concept of an outdoor shower, but not going outdoors all the time. So we really created these really large pieces of glass that really, when they're able to open up these windows, it really kind of creates the same experience as being outdoors, but indoors. They had no issues being right up on the glass for privacy, but they really enjoy this spot and really love being in this space. That mirrored door actually leads to his closet beyond. So really this kind of all these units really tie together. Here we are in just two different rooms, one a powder room on the left. Again, how we are starting to introduce metal in all these spaces and kind of bringing this materiality of almost kind of the same wash of stone that we use at the outdoor fireplace, kind of the steel base. This materiality change is really to kind of start tying all these different thoughts and vibes throughout the house to really make it one cohesive volume within. And on the right is his closet, which was a really fun exercise in designing. It's, again, bringing steel, oak to the shelving, to the rod system, to the storage, which really kind of, again, brought all these elements together in a really, I think, sophisticated and tailored way. If we kind of make our way back down, and here we are on the back side or the water side of the house. As I had mentioned, you know, with kind of the VE zone and just really creating privacy at the front, we raised this whole house up a couple of feet. So we need to get ourselves back down to, traditional grade. So we really took that really thoughtfully with the architecture team and the landscape team, which with that, we were able to create an upper terrace with this beautiful fireplace, double-sided fireplace that opens up to the great room on the other side. But then just a few steps down to the pool terrace. And with that, as I mentioned, every square footage counted for something. We had to be really intentional about what we put on the site. And it couldn't just be there for no rhyme or reason. It really had to have more than one purpose. And, this stone wall, this retaining wall is a really prime example of that, where on one side at the pool terrace, it's this beautiful bench, and on the upper terrace, it's just extra seating. So again, people can hang out at the top, come at the bottom, but really kind of this duality of functions on all these spaces. This back elevation also is starting to really show up all the elements that I was talking about early on, where that white kind of more traditional volume cantilever slightly stepped over the darker base with that steel channel kind of wrapping its way around. And then you can see the exaggerated eaves, how we've had standing seam, but then we stopped it short and left kind of these more solid pieces where that's where the gutter kind of came about. So really using these really forced elements of us needing to kind of really think about zoning and rules, but really kind of start to create its own narrative in its design. So it really all felt intentional. You can see we used really that horizontal nature in language, because this house, we wanted to kind of accentuate its horizontal nature and not the verticality. So you can see it in the stone, in the ipe slats on the decking, all the materials really kind of express that horizontal nature. Here we are on kind of the big shot of the back side. Here's the overall water side composition. That fireplace right dead center helps, I think, really pin this whole composition together. One thing we really were focused on was we wanted the front and the water side to almost feel the same. We didn't want the formal, we always think the front yard is kind of the formality, but we really thought this needs to kind of bleed into one big concept. Because the water side is so heavily trafficked from the beach and the boats beyond, we really almost wanted people coming by land or by sea to have the same experience, to really feel this formality and so, fit within the neighborhood and its context. And I think one way we're really kind of successfully was able to break this apart was these ideas of these three gables really not touching, which you'll see in all of kind of, I think really resonates in all of our work, is letting that air, that space between really bleed, that sky bleeding in between the white, picking itself back out, really breaks down the scale of this project. And really, I think does it in a really successful way. So you can see the dormers, those are all pitched a certain way. So we were able to get a lot of program in a pretty large square footage, but I think broken down into really a tasteful and really sophisticated scale. And then here we are really on, if we're standing out really where the beach starts and really looking back at what this neighborhood looks like. I think when we look at it from here, and I think from many areas, but you can really see how this starts to fit in the neighborhood. The context is really important. When you look at our structure, those two gables facing the water, you see that's also echoed in some of the neighborhood or some of the houses to the left and right. That green space and that air bleeding in between, it just feels like our house, is broken into just three structures. Just if you kind of step back, it's again just three different houses in the neighborhood. So I think this really shows how thinking in not only this really tight neighborhood composition, but also with the restraints of kind of what we need to do with the zoning and the laws here in this town, we were able to really create something that I think really fits within a narrative of this neighborhood in a context which kind of has a lot of things going on, but I think it really fits in this really beautiful neighborhood.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. Now we'll talk about Hidden Overlook. And the team on this project was builder Payne Boucher and landscape architect Chris Horiuchi and interior designer Gene Verberidge. And the Hutker Architects team on it was Deepa Partha Sarathi and Aaron Levin. This project's located on Cape Cod, and more specifically, it's located on Scraggy Neck, which is secluded knob of land poking out into Buzzards Bay. And this property was south-facing. Unlike Ryan's project, which had many restrictions, this project had no restrictions, which is unusual for Cape and Island properties. There was only one review board that we needed to go through for the studio that I'll share a little later. But for the most part, there were no restrictions on this property. It's a 3-acre property, rolling meadow down to Megansett Harbor. But what's really most interesting about this property is that it belonged to a prominent Boston family whose summer house burned down in the 1940s. And I think the house was actually built in the early 1900s at the time. But the house burned down and it was never rebuilt in all those years. In 60 years, it was never rebuilt. The only thing remaining was this ruinous old foundation, visible in this photo as a series of mounds and now evergreen trees. And this is a view towards Megansett Harbor, just downhill from that knob. And this is south facing. And I always find these views really interesting because they're filtered views. And I just love the tall stems of these pines and how you're looking through those towards the view. And it really set up the project really nice. So during one of our first visits, before we even began design, we all met on site. The design team met on site, the clients met on site, and we all took about 15 minutes, 20 minutes to gather whatever we could find. Man-made materials, natural materials, and we all collected those and brought those back to this pile that you see on the right. And we found really incredibly cool things like charred wood from the old house, stone from the old foundation. We collected fallen leaves and pine needles because it was autumn when we were out there. We found rusty metal, silver bark, lichen, and it was this exercise that started to create the palette and the tone and the texture for the new home. It was important to our client that they honor the history of the site, and the home's design needed to accommodate their growing family, their children, their grandchildren, and also be a place to entertain large crowds. But at the same time, they wanted it to embody a casual farmhouse vibe. The plan on the left is the 3-acre parcel. We located the house optimally where the original home was located. And you arrive, again, the arrival at this property reinforces that you are getting away. The driveway winds through this wide meadow dotted with these beautiful birch trees that Chris and team had located. And to use the entire site, we also included these integrated paths that lead you to water and outbuildings. So the plan is organized in a way that main house is on the right. We have a guest house on the left. Further left to the property is a garden and greenhouse. And in front of the guest house there is the pool, the spa, and the sauna. In the lower right is a studio at the water's edge. And that was really the only building that we had restrictions as it was in the AE zone. The plan and architecture evolved as a collection of smaller structures. Much like Ryan talked about the space between, you'll see that similar language in this house as well. So it evolved as a collection of simple gables connected with flat roofs and added elements like breakfast nooks and window seats and entries, which will be more illustrated in the photography. The plan is organized around a broad circulation corridor that spans the entire front of the house, through the landscape on the left, and then connects itself to the guest house beyond. And as we talked earlier about the narratives in our work, it's also those visual destinations that attract the eye that are equally important. So the way this corridor was set up was with two open, well-lit staircases on either side. So when you enter the house in the center, you look left, you look right, your eye is drawn all the way through this house to those visual elements. The primary suite is on the right, the guest suite upper right, and the main living spaces are all organized off that central corridor, view facing, meadow facing. To the left is the guest house and garden area. And then we have this just beautiful assemblage of exterior spaces that include the terraces, the pools, the spas, the fire pit, adjacent to a screen porch on the home. This is the arrival and the entry of the house. Again, these are simple gable volumes, and those receive the silver vertical boards, similar to the tree bark that we collected. The connectors and additive elements received a darker wood inspired by the charred material that we found in the property. And the roof colors is a rusty red bronze color that was inspired by those oak leaves and that autumn, when we were out there in autumn collecting all the pine needles and stuff. And what you'll see in these photos is that what's unique about this roof is it does change color during the time of day and throughout the seasons, which I find really interesting. A couple of environmental features on this property, which are worth pointing out, is that we do have a full geothermal system. I think there's about 16 vertical wells drilled. Those are located to the left of this house for heating and cooling. But what was new to us and kind of an interesting sustainable feature is that we have and has specified an in-roof solar panel system that's integrated into the metal roof. So those panel systems use the metal roof surface to absorb the solar energy. And then that energy is then transferred to the fluid within the in-roof panel systems. So you could just imagine it like it's a radiant heat system, but it's on your roof. And that system has the capacity to heat the pool and all of the domestic hot water. And the home is actually a two-story house. It was important to keep the silhouette low. So the second story is all in the eaves of this house. And as Ryan had shared on his Westport project, we are separating these volumes, allowing the sky to bleed, and helping to address scale at that level as well. When working with Chris Horiuchi, we were looking at ways to better utilize what sometimes might be often neglected areas in home designs, and that's the flat roofs. And Chris and team selected a low-growing mix of this northeast sedum, and the mix tends to be greener in the growing season, just has these beautiful flowers of red and pink colors. And they seem to stay that way throughout much of the seasons. And even today, in most of our work, the flat roofs we design are vegetated because of a couple of really important benefits that we find those roofs to have. A few to point out is that they improve drainage by absorbing the excess of rainfall. They do increase the lifespan of the roof by protecting the waterproof membrane. They increase thermal performance by absorbing the sun's energy, and they also support wildlife habitats by attracting birds and other wildlife. They're also incredibly visually beautiful. So when you're looking at these flat roofs from any portion of the second floor windows, you're looking out at at the greenery that's illustrated here. So in all of our homes, we keep the experience of the journey in mind, and first through the landscape, then through the architecture, and then through the interiors. And that journey should be compelling and memorable. The image to the left is these steel vents that create an implied connection to the guest house. All the metalwork in this house was done by Rich Corner of Blue Black here in North Falmouth. The image to the right is the entry, and you move along this boardwalk just surrounded by these tall grasses and enter this shadow box of an entry before it opens up into a very voluminous indoor space. Again, these destinations that attract the eye are so important in our work. To the left, you see that open stair. To the right, you see the view beyond. Transitions in our homes come in several forms and incredibly important to our work. The entry specifically gets special treatment, and we call this activating the space between. So as you move through spaces, there's this moment of pause that just allows you just this moment before you move from space to space. That might be through a thickening of walls, as seen in this image on the right, between the entry and the living room, in ceiling treatment, whether it's vaulted or in the case of this entry, that we're starting to bring that darker wood from the outside in to make that connection to what inspired us early on, and ceiling heights and floor materials. And that's Poppy and Posy on the lower left, which were a huge help in retrieving some of those materials we were scavenging for on site early on. So this is what we've referred to, I think Ryan mentioned, the life room, because that's where we gather to share life and share memories. We like to think of glass in several ways. You can probably point it out in 3 ways. Large expanses of glass, like you're seeing on the left-hand side, that's a 10-foot by 24-foot unit. You might consider that sort of a panorama or a landscape view. I'm also going to talk in a few photos about when glass comes together at the corner is a connected view, or a single punch in a wall, which is a focused view. In this case, this is a landscape view. And oftentimes when we're working on the water, we're so focused on just that 3 degree of water view that the sky is equally important. So in this space, there's just this beautiful connection between meadow, water, and sky. I mean, these 10-foot units, you can stand up there in the night sky and see all the stars. It's pretty remarkable. The counterpoint to that, though, is the image on the right, which is an inland garden. That's the entry. And that's allowing light to enter from both sides of the space, which gives it better balance and energy, as even Ryan pointed out in the living room of the home he shared. This is standing on the terrace, looking back into that life room space. This is looking out at the meadow view, and just is, I think, a good illustration of the inside connections and those seamless transitions. You can also see through this space as we did when we were entering through the living room and back out to the entry. In this house, the edges and transitions from our materials, from one material to the next, are minimal. They're minimally detailed. There are no corner boards. There are no rafter tails, and everything about that in this design just breathes clarity and calm as detailed. This is the kitchen. The kitchen is in its own room. The living room is to the left and the screen porch is to the right. And cooking was a very important part of this family's lifestyle. So the kitchen was optimized with that in mind. Some features of this kitchen, again, that we're bringing in darker drawers and trim work inspired by the charred wood we found. And in the background is the breakfast area, and that is an additive element to the gables. which is again lined in that darker material. This is an example, a little close-up of that standing there, of that connected view. When you bring these windows and doors together at the corner, it feels like the landscape is seamless. This breakfast area just, again, extends into that meadow. The stair on the left is, again, an example of a visual destination. So as I pointed out earlier in the plan, when you enter the house, look to the left, this is what you're looking at. It's fully glazed wall. It extends up along the roof line all the way to the ridge, kind of like a Tesla windshield. And with its open risers, that natural light just creates this really interesting pattern of shadows throughout the day and time of year. The image to the right is the primary sitting area, and a wonderful example of Jean Verberidge furnishing choices. She also included lots of like wall coverings in a number of these rooms, which added a lot of pattern and texture to these spaces. And the day bed beyond there is again lined in the darker material because we are treating those spaces differently. And this is one that you might consider a focus view, punched window in a wall looking out towards the art studio. And this is the primary bedroom, and I think some of the special features to point out here include this just wonderfully warm oak ceiling balanced with these cream-colored walls. Flat ceiling in this space was important because we wanted to create a sense of protection and intimacy within the space. And directly adjacent to it in the center here is a sleeping porch that looks out onto a sheltered corner of the landscape. So incredibly private part of the property. But the details, the details are just wonderfully done. In the door, you can just see this beautiful bronze inlay that Rich Corner had fabricated as well. But again, it's drawing again inspiration from the other pieces of metal and surrounds that we've used throughout the house. Areas of wellness and retreat were important to this client. We have sauna and spa and massage rooms in this home. And we took the opportunity to create these different experiences throughout the property. And this, you're looking at the pool, the spa, and the sauna in the background there, and the guest house and pool house to the right. My client insists that the sauna was inspired from a shipping container, but you can be the judge of that. And the image to the left is the primary bath, again, designed with a private garden adjacent to it. The soaking tub opens up onto this deck and water element. And when those doors are open, just the sound of that water just promotes relaxation in that space. That space also has an outdoor shower to the left of it as well. And then the image to the right is the artist studio that is right on the water's edge. It's elevated because it's in the AE zone. It's a place to retreat and paint and read and nap. But again, this entire property is about the journey. So we are moving you through these integrated paths to these special spots on the property, such as this artist studio. Again, it's an outbuilding, so it's treated with the darker material. Yeah, and this image is the meadowside view, the waterside view, and illustrates just this wonderful collection of outdoor spaces that Chris and team created and the different degrees of immersion you can have in the landscape. Immediately in the foreground here is the screen porch that opens up to the fire pit. And I think the success of this project rests on that balancing act between the rustic associations of some of the materials and forms and the understated detailing of them. And it brings a feeling of modern living to it. And I'm so excited we have Mark Hucker on the call because I'm going to give an overview of this. But Daniel, if you want to go deeper, we might have to call on him. So what's next for Hucker Architects? So building on our experience and through further research and design, our vision is to create a new standard for custom homes, to be built both, again, passive in their demand on the environment and community, and active in their influence on the well-being of their inhabitants. And so we're excited to announce the launch of the ONTIC initiative, with a mission of advancing the art of dwelling through intentional alignment with branches of the natural, behavioral, and physical sciences that overlap with residential space making. And there are 5 pillars of focus areas to support this mission. I'll touch on each of those briefly, but rest is a really important one. And, you know, we as occupants seek safe sleeping spaces, and we're looking to provide stress-free and calming environments as a basic factor in achieving quality sleep. And we're going to explore optimum bed placements and room layouts and use of natural materials and ventilation and sound. That's how we'll be working, addressing rest. And nature is another pillar, and biophilic design, connecting people to nature and creating connection, as we all know, to nature reduces stress and improves cognitive functions, creativity, and promotes healing. So that's going to be a primary focus, of this as well. Movement and the act, or as we find it, the act or process of changing place and position or posture, and designing spaces that provide movement opportunities to improve health and promote calmness and mindfulness. And nourishment, another pillar. And we're going to be focused on designing spaces to prepare healthy food and hydration. This is a project we completed a few years back in Concord. This kitchen is actually host to many cooking classes right now, farm to table cooking classes that this client hosts, and it's received a lot of great attention in that regard. And then finally, creating the spaces that promote interaction, relationship development, and influencing happiness. And as Ryan shared, this project fits seamlessly into its context. So if the ultimate luxury is time to spend with our family, we believe in supporting wellness in all its forms, and that must come next. And that's what we're studying. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Jim and Ryan and Mark, for sharing this beautiful work. I'd like to open it to questions. We're at 1:07. We usually wrap up at 1:30. So we have time for those burning questions that everyone has. Anyone like to start? Just unmute yourself and...
Do you want me to exit this, Daniel? Or it's a nice background?
Yeah, it's a nice background. We might
Okay.
have to put it in reverse.
I can start off with something, Daniel.
Please, Matt.
A beautiful presentation. Thank you for putting that together. Your work is beautiful. I love seeing it and seeing some of the behind the scenes stuff here. So one question is just about like kind of the exterior aesthetics. Like one of the projects, the first project was very contemporary, but yet still had a lot of kind of like, traditional contextual details compared to the second project was, as you said, more kind of a minimalistically detailed. Is it the client kind of heavily driving that, or is it context? Just kind of interested to know, since your work does span such a big range of kind of, it's not traditional, but it airs towards that all the way to the kind of modern side. Like, how do you figure out where a project falls in that humongous spectrum?
So I guess I'll chime in for that first project. It was really contextual. We didn't, because I think maybe different either client requests or not, meaning compared to Jim's project where there was no neighbors, you could kind of maybe be a little bit different in that context where, on that Connecticut project, there was a neighborhood, there was a gambrel to the left, a two doors down, there was a lot going on and we wanted it to feel right. We didn't want to be, just sticking a glass box there. We really wanted to be sensitive to its surroundings. And I think that's what we're really, cautious of whenever we design. I think we really want to fit not only what the client really designs or what they love, but also fits within the neighborhood. I think it's really important. I think that's really where I think we start from. Really, what should it be, and how does it say something to the neighborhood and to people approaching the property either by land or by sea? Again, it's really that kind of concept. I think how we typically design is really how is it going to fit? It's not just kind of what the client might just need.
Yeah, I love that.
Mhm.
There's not a pre-established agenda from yourself. It's really being a
It's
steward of
not.
the neighborhood, the
Exactly.
context, and an architect. Yeah, that's great.
And we don't
Mhm.
really love, I think probably like most people, we don't love to design or think about what the house should be without visiting the site first.
Of
I
course.
think we Google Earth that project before we got there, but when we got there, we're like, oh, it's tighter, neighborhood is there, it really had a different presence, even just being on the site compared to what we thought it might have been just from, the realtor photos or something like that. So any kind of maybe preconceived thoughts of what should have been on the site really was quickly changed, not only by the neighborhood, but also in that project because of the constraints of the town. It really kind of led us to thinking differently and designing details differently.
Mhm.
Excellent. Nice. Well, nicely done.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
fit in perfectly
you.
there, it looks like.
Thank you. Great team effort on that one.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It's refreshing. I'm actually on the Cape now, and it's refreshing, especially not being so tied into the shingle style rambling buildings that are typical for new construction down here. In fact, I'm a couple of doors away from your Osterville Piano Avenue project, so I eagerly watch that daily.
Mm.
But I had a question. Most of both projects, your clients seem to have a great appreciation and also have extensive art collections. And I was wondering, when you hire them, is that a trigger that this is going to be a enlightened client? But do they within their response to your narrative questions, do they tell you about their art collections? Because they were, especially the first one, they were very dramatic, and I was wondering if those were specifically bought for the projects, or if they had these collections that kind of informed your design. And do you get a good sense of where they're coming from with their art collection?
Ryan, I can answer to Hidden Overlook quickly, and then you could answer to Westport. That's a great question, and it's a question we ask at concept. We want, as you pointed out, you see this wonderful collection of art in both of these projects, and we're making sure that we're accommodating that art at the very beginning of the project. We want to balance that with fenestration and solid walls, and work with the designers to establish which pieces are most important and where they need to go. So we do start early in the process. It doesn't, in the case of Hidden Overlook, a lot, I would say half that art was probably collected during construction, either overseas or here in the States. As excitement built and more walls were available, they began to collect more and more of the artwork. And there just seems to be a heightened level of understanding about that process, we found. And we've been fortunate to have clients with significant collections that we've been able to accommodate. Ryan?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Those homeowners actually owned or currently still own a house around the corner, so they had some art there. But this new house, they were only bringing a certain amount of pieces, and they worked really with as Jim's point, with the whole team. And for instance, that big kind of really loud moment at the stair across from the stair, that was actually commissioned for that space. The one across from the door is actually the one that they originally had at their other property. So that one we knew was always going to go on front of the door, kind of be the statement for that center kind of walk procession. But we needed something to go on that other wall, and the clients actually commissioned that piece for there. So there's kind of this similar language in those two elements, but they were really kind of thought about right at the beginning of the project. There's other spaces that, we had maybe some windows and the clients really wanted a piece of art there. So we kind of rethought certain things. But a lot of the times, our clients do tell us right at the beginning that they have a pretty extensive art collection, because we do treat the windows and the glass very differently. So we're not affecting the quality of these, kind of really delicate and important pieces throughout the life of the house. So it's really calculated.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add to that too, Ryan, James, I think you asked the question is, at the same time, we're bringing in lighting consultants because it is absolutely critical to know how this art is going to be lit. I mean, as we all know, we're residential architects. I mean, the first time our clients often get to experience the home lit is the first night they spend there. It's not one of these things you actually can test along the way. So looking at plywood and insulation for so long. So as part of that team, we are bringing in lighting consultants early on. And then lastly, this is just such a good question. The nourishment slide that had this client actually designed this house for the art. They had been sitting on storage units of art in New York for years, and this was the opportunity to pull it out, dust it off, and showcase it. So love the question. Yeah.
I have a question. Thank you very much for this presentation. I've been a big Mark Hutker fan for many years. My question involves, it's obvious that you guys are working very hard to think of details and big picture and create a connection with your clients. But I wonder how you avoid self-editing during these beginning phases. I don't see any fences around the pools, for example. I can imagine several arguments with people about whether floating stairs will actually work. And I'm just wondering if it's a matter, you've sort of hinted at consultants, but is there some way that you are able to protect your freedom in this early design process away from, the building codes, for example, or what really can be done? That's my question. Does that make sense?
No.
No.
That wasn't me. No, Ryan.
That wasn't me either. But I guess that's a really good point. It's like, in that first project, there was just things we had to work with, heights and all that good stuff. And we just think differently. If we could, I think, all design whatever we wanted, it might be a massive hodgepodge. But I think kind of having some constraints really makes us think deeper and harder. And I think really helps evolve the architecture. For example, around the pool enclosure, you know what I mean? Like, we're really important, that's a neighborhood, it needs a pool enclosure, but we were really specific on how it's detailed. So it really kind of recedes into the landscape. It kind of is a part of the overall concept of the house. We never think about things kind of, oh, we should have thought about that. It's really right at the beginning, kind of how do all these things tie together, kind of create, again, this big narrative of the house. I think that's how we really approach it. Because
yeah, and that value of assembling an entire team right at the beginning of the project. The self-editing seems to happen throughout the project, though, and we don't always get it right the first time. I don't always get it right the first time, and sometimes I see things differently when I'm in construction and on site, and helping to make those informed decisions based on that experience. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I have a question about the second project, Jim, where you were talking about the geothermal and the integrated roof panels.
Yeah.
It's probably, a little more technical
Then
than
I
we
can answer,
necessarily
Amanda.
need to get into, but that definitely jumped out at me, and I'd love to learn more about the systems, and if you can share anything with us this afternoon, that would be great.
Yeah, hey, Amanda, it's great to see you.
Sorry, my camera's not working, and I also really enjoyed this presentation. It's so nice to just in general hear about the process that you guys take and just the
Yeah.
passion for it. It's inspiring.
Well, I'd be happy to share the in-roof solar system. The geothermal, I'm sure many of us have done before, and that was coordinated with Builder and a New England installation company. But the in-roof solar was just like this, I don't know, really awesome system that eliminated the photovoltaics on the roof. You know, they really haven't figured that out yet, and even the Tesla tiles haven't been figured out fully yet. We considered that, but we didn't appreciate the detailing of those tiles quite yet. But I'd be happy to share this system, as it's a new system to us, but we learned a lot along the way. I mean,
Awesome.
It seems counterintuitive, right, to have radiant heat on your roof, but it is supplying the domestic hot water and pool heat for this house and this property. Yeah.
Very cool. We'll have to grab lunch.
Yeah, we will. Any questions about Poppy and Posey? No.
How old are they?
I think they're only a couple of years. Yeah. Well, this is great.
I actually had a question. First of all, a comment. I've always admired your work, and what resonated really well with me today are your experiences of entering the space as a sense of arrival. You can really feel it, especially the frame. It's almost like frames going into the home, leading you up the pathway. So I've really enjoyed this presentation. I'm curious, you have clients that are open to contemporary modern design, and how are your clients finding you, and how are you finding your clients? Because I think it's wonderful that you have clientele who are open and also obviously have generous budgets.
I would say three ways that our clients are coming to us right now. Number one is referral. I mean, we've been in business now for 38 years, and we've been fortunate to have the success of these projects lead to projects of our clients' friends and family. Instagram is a big attraction for us, and as many of you know from last week's summit, we've released our third book, New England Coastal, Homes That Tell a Story. Our second book, A Sense of Place, has been really attractive for us, and we've received a lot of clients from that second book, and we're hoping this third book will do the same. We're doing something fun. Our clients are hosting small, intimate gatherings for each of the homes in that book, so they're able to build an invitation list, and we're able to share the specifics of the home and celebrate the completion of them. So those are usually the three ways we're seeing our work come through.
That's wonderful. I hadn't realized the books have that much of an impact as far as developing. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you.
That might actually be a great topic for another webinar, is how to do self-publishing, or if you're doing it with a publisher in residential work. So
yeah,
to self.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be a good topic.
Yeah. I have a quick. Does anyone else have a question? I mean, I don't want to. My question is about the landscapes, and these are heavily considered or strongly considered landscapes, around the perimeter of these homes, and that reach out either into the larger site or the smaller site. Can you talk a little bit about working with landscape architects when you bring them on board? Are they there from the beginning? Is your whole consultant team there from the beginning? Lighting, interiors, everything? How do you manage that traffic flow, that information?
A lot of emails.
Yeah. But the
it's very in a project of both of these sizes. Yeah.
Yeah, and those questions are asked at the first prospect calls. So when a prospect call comes in, we're addressing and recommending building a full team on these projects. So to answer your question, are they involved early? Yes, they are. And especially landscape, and more often now interiors are involved at the earliest stages of design, even at our concept diagrams. Even it's something chicken scratch that doesn't look like a house.
Yeah, we're already
They're there.
typically teaming up with somebody.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of clients have, this might not be their first rodeo when they design a house or this scale, that they know how important it is from maybe other processes not having everybody on board in the beginning, that they realize it's so key to have everyone at that table, right at the beginning as often as possible. So it really helps execute a project or, of this scaling caliber, really almost seamlessly, having everyone there all the time.
Yeah, and we're talking quite openly and frequently about budget, because we know it's total project cost. It's not just the cost of the house, it's the land cost, it's the consultant cost, it's the landscape, it's the furnishings. So we're having those conversations early on to help establish budget for these projects as well.
I like the fact that you're actually bringing them in at concept, because there's nothing better than the push and pull of the different disciplines.
Yeah.
And really making it look like it's seamless, that it's one Gesamtwerk, versus just an applique after the architecture's done, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We're coming up on 1:30, and Sarah, you have a question. I don't want to cut you off. You had raised your hand.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I love your work. I've always admired it, and even though it's very clear you guys designed for a very specific tax bracket, I've always appreciated the fact that the homes that you guys are designing are not sprawling and unnecessary, right? It seems like you're designing and trying to keep homes to the usable, not the social status of having a certain square footage of a home, right? It seems like you're very purposeful about the spaces. And I'm seeing a lot of these, higher budget properties, especially on the larger properties. Clients are subdividing them, or, they'll have a property and they'll break it up into pieces, and, they'll design a home, or people buy a home that's on a property that's already divided. And a lot of these clients that have a lot of money are buying up these large pieces of land, and it's really great in a way to keep that open space, right? So that we're not getting this density that's just destroying this gorgeous landscape. And I'm wondering if you guys have had any interactions with clients that want to take portions of their property and maybe put conservation rights on them, or try to make it so that, it doesn't get divided up in the future, to help with just keeping the natural landscape, and not necessarily just for the clients, but just for, us in general. We just keep seeing all these huge properties, keep eating up gorgeous landscape.
Yeah. Ryan, I don't, you could speak to that parcel behind your project that was owned by your client for protection, right?
That's right. So there's what you don't see from that project right across the way is another piece of property that they purchased as well. That I don't think you can really see it.
You really can't, but it's above the H.
Yeah, it's right, right, literally across the way. You can see some of the landscape gestures actually connect both spaces, but they are not building anything there. Again, they want to be able to see the water from both directions, kind of just overflow parking, but they're really trying to keep, to your point, not adding another dense, another house in already a dense location. But we also, I think, with some of these larger sprawling pieces of property, I think our clients are really focused on, and I think that's what we do in generally, is just creating these heirlooms properties that, we already start thinking about the landscape and the big gesture of like, adding more wildlife and really kind of just letting landscape kind of bleed out. So it's just I don't think any of our clientele ever have the idea of breaking up their property because, you know, they design that first home. We ask all those questions of how is this house going to grow with you? So hopefully they won't have to add something later. You know what I mean? We kind of think about what's coming next. What's these life patterns that we talk about? You know, you might not have any grandkids now, but this is a summer home. How do you see that being played out in a few years? We want to be the ones to kind of help design that. So something, you know, 20 years from now, someone doesn't split it up and stick another 4 pieces of property. We're really starting to play that out forward. So we're really kind of thinking about the land and kind of its environment as a whole, right at the beginning.
Yep. It's a good question, but thank you.
Thank you. We've got 7 seconds here. I don't know if we're
It's going to blow up.
Yeah.
we'll see in 1 second, but thank you so very much. This was great, and
Thank you.
Thank you.
we look forward to seeing more Hutker work in the region and in the nation.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you
Thank
again.
you.
Yep. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.